Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today, we're going to be talking about some fantasy football contract players who are going to boom in 2024.
Hike!
All right, Joe. So, one of the more common phrases that we talk about on here is that players are going to ball out so they can cash out. Well, you and I are going to be talking about three players each. Who's the first guy that you're eyeing that you think has some extra incentive to play hard this year?
Yeah, my first player I'm going to go with is quarterback Dak Prescott. And I think he's, truly kind of hurt with the Cowboys not giving him a second contract here. He's played well. I know he hasn't always done well in the playoffs, and I think that's kind of why Jerry hasn't given him the money. But in terms of, regular season and fantasy, he's just so underrated, continues to perform. I know in most leagues last year, he was the QB number one. I think he honestly continues on his success in big season from last year. I've got him projected for 44,477 yards and 37 touchdowns this year, along with 227 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns as well. So I think he's going to have a pretty decent year and end up, if it's not going to be the Cowboys paying him at the end of the year, I think somebody else will, maybe even like the Las Vegas Raiders.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was curious how you were going to spin this because he had an unbelievable year last year. He had 36 touchdowns, was not a career high. He had 37 touchdowns back in 2021. I want to say the 4,500 yards might have been a career high for Dak. So you have him roughly around the same passing yard numbers and matching his touchdown numbers from before. So I mean, some people might expect him to kind of have a drop off. I mean, you could say, what did they really bring to the offense? I mean, they didn't really help him at all. I mean, who's their running back? We don't really know. The Tyron Smith, who has been the blindside protector for so long, he's no longer there. I know he's getting older. So it's a little bit of a different Cowboys team this year.
Yeah, I honestly think the lack of the run game is why I'm, more conviction. I mean, we saw even Tony Pollard, it took a while for him to kind of get going last year. So almost last year, they didn't really have much of a run game either. And it was on the shoulders of Dak and CeeDee Lamb. And, I'm expecting CeeDee Lamb back. I think if there's one guy that the Cowboys end up paying, it would be him, seeing how, I mean, he's a quarterback dependent player anyways. So I could see not paying Dak, but to me, you got to have CeeDee Lamb. I mean, if they don't have Lamb on the field, that offense is just, lackluster. And then I think with the emergence too, Brandon Cooks, I think he's going to be the wide receiver too. You still got Jake Ferguson. So, I think the passing volume will be there for Dak to give you that fantasy upside.
That's one thing that I look back last year and regret pretty considerably. I read way too much into Mike McCarthy saying that he wanted to run the football. That's basically
Mike McCarthy never ran the football, not even at Green Bay. So,
well, you called that bluff from the beginning,
right,
but
yeah.
I was listening to the sweet nothings that he was telling the press corps, that this was going to happen, and he did the exact opposite. Dak, went nuclear. So, it goes to show you just don't listen to everything these coaches say.
Yeah, you got to be careful with what you take away from these, press conferences during training camp.
So my first player that I think is gonna boom based on what happened, I'm gonna go with Najee Harris. Why I say what happened is he had a 5th-year option, could have played an additional year with the Pittsburgh Steelers, but the Steelers opted to decline that 5th-year option, which that means he now is going to be a free agent at the end of the season. You now have got a new offensive coordinator with Arthur Smith, the former head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, and what I find interesting is this man really likes to run the football. Last year with the Falcons, the total amount of carries between Bijan, Tyler Algier, and Cordell Patterson, 450 carries. That's a whopping amount of carries. I want to say it was off the top of my head. I want to say it was in the top 5 as far as the amount of carries that a team, ran the football. So Najee Harris is kind of more of that gritty, tough nose driving running back. And let's not forget when Arthur Smith started to he was on the map, if you will, was when he was Mike Vrabel. He was the offensive coordinator of the Titans. Who did he have? Derrick Henry as his running back. So Jaylen Warren will spell in a little bit. I am slightly concerned about Cordell Patterson, But I think that with Najee now being in a prove it year, I like it because I think that really they have a lack of passing weapons in Pittsburgh. They got George Pickens. That's about it. Roman Wilson, he's now starting to be banged up. They got Van Jefferson, guy who hasn't been able to make it with the Rams or the Falcons. They got Pat Freiermuth. They just don't have a lot of firepower. So they're going to rely on that tough run and defense. That's all they're going to do. Run it, ground and pound, basically, is what I see happening.
Yeah, I mean, they basically did that strategy right to all the way to the playoffs last year. I know they had Deontay Johnson around last year, but their quarterback play was, subpar. I think either Justin Fields or Russell Wilson's definitely an upgrade over what they had last year. But yeah, in terms of their weapons, you're not wrong. They're not there. And Arthur Smith, he loves to run the ball, and they like to do play action off of that. So I do think Najee should definitely have that volume that he needs in order to boom this year.
Not to mention, they have really addressed that offensive line.
Yeah.
They've drafted some offensive linemen in the first round. They brought in free agents. This offensive line has been a sieve for the longest time, so they really have addressed that position.
Yeah, they really have. That should help. And I mean, even with that, you're talking about, I know me and a lot of other people are always giving Najee flack, but that, the one thing that is pretty impressive is every year that he's been in the league, he's had over 1,000 yards.
Are you enjoying this episode so far? Well, if you are, subscribe to our YouTube channel, smash that like button, and hit the notification bell for upcoming videos. We do videos throughout the year, so you're not going to want to miss what we have in store. All right, Joe, so who is your second boom player based on being in a contract year?
Yeah, my next player, you could call it a homer pick, but I'm not really taking it as that, Steve. I'm going to go with running back Javonte Williams. And look, and I get all of the hoopla that's been going on this offseason here with people saying Javonte is going to get cut from this team. Javonte's not going to get cut from this team. I think he's going to be the RB1. Him and Sean Payton looked back at his college tape. Sean Payton said, I want this running back. He then, in between the training camp practices, lost weight. He's at the weight he played at in college. Got back to, when he came into the league his rookie year, that's when he was at his best. So if he's back at that weight, as long as this big caveat will be if Sean Payton uses him like the RB1, they do have some other options, but I think he do. And I've got him projected to get his first 1,000-yard season this year. And I think he'll definitely be motivated by being in a contract year. I'm not sure if he'll be back with the Broncos after this year, but that means he's also auditioning for 31 other teams.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that he's not went over 1,000 yards. And you said that. I was very surprised by that.
Yeah, he's not. He came close in his rookie year. He had 900, but for his, much as he was hyped up and looked like a real good RB1, he hasn't rushed for 1,000 yards. And I know, the one year he hurt his knee. So last year he was banged up. He wasn't the same Javonte, but I think this year, losing the weight, being a second year removed from that ACL injury, that's typically when we see guys do better. So I think this will be a boom year for Javonte.
I actually agree with you in the fact, because I've heard you say this before, I'm not all that concerned about Jaleel McLaughlin. I think Jaleel McLaughlin's a good change of pace back, and he is very elusive. I think he'll have a good yard per carry amount, but I don't think he'll be the guy. The concern that I would have for Javonte is how involved Audric Estime is. That's the part I'm concerned. Or possibly, I don't know. I haven't been following Broncos training camp. There was some significant buzz, I thought, about Blake Watson. I don't know if he's doing anything or not, the undrafted rookie.
Well, he just came back off of the NFI, so he kind of been dealing with a hamstring. So he's just kind of picked up this week. But I think he's more a guy that's going to get preseason hype and not so much training camp practice.
Yeah, I agree with you. But that's my concern with Javonte. Otherwise, I think he will be auditioning for other teams.
Yeah, I think Audric Estime is definitely the one to look out for in terms of the, who's going to get those first down carries. But I think, with the work that Javonte's put in to lose the weight, get back to his college weight, to get to that guy that Sean Payton liked to see on film, I think he's going to get every opportunity to lead this backfield.
So the player that I'm looking at to boom based on being in a contract year is going to be wide receiver Deontay Johnson. I've been critical of this guy in the past, but he is now being traded from the Steelers, going to the Panthers. We've been hearing from Dave Canales, the head coach of the Panthers, that there's actually been some sort of criticism for what I saw online, that, hey, we haven't been really seeing a lot of the deep ball in practice. What's going on there? Well, they want Bryce Young to get the ball out. I thought I saw something in 2.5 seconds or something. I mean, they want quick decisions fast. Deontay's a good route runner. And if you look what happened with Adam Thielen last year, he played 17 games, had 137 targets, 103 catches for 1,000 yards and 4 touchdowns. Now, I even am not that bullish on Deontay. I'm saying I think he can break out because I think he's capable of those numbers. I'm a little bit more conservative in my projections, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that he can get over 1,000 yards this year.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I mean, you hear Canales talk too. I mean, he said the offense runs through Deontay, and I think Deontay is going to be a big reason why I think Bryce Young could have a better year too, along with the offensive line changes, and then just having Dave Canales. Simply, he seems to be that quarterback whisperer. What he was able to do with Baker Mayfield last year, and then even believe he was in Seattle with Geno Smith prior to that.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's correct. So I agree with you, Joe, and that's where the question will be, who really emerges from this receiver room. We just heard Xavier Legette, promising young rookie, been seeing a lot of great highlights out of camp. He's now has a lower leg injury. I saw Mingo. He hasn't been able to impress in his rookie year. And then you got Adam Thielen. He's kind of older, so this Deontay could have an opportunity here.
Yeah. I mean, unless it's just, we said be careful with Canales said, unless he's just putting smoke out there, I think he should have the opportunities.
Yeah, you got to parse through it. Is it smoke
Right.
and mirrors or is it reality? But the thought is there, and then honestly, with any of this, right? We're trying to prognosticate and determine who we think is going to boom, who we think could do really well. At the end of the day, you have a theory. You have a rationale as to why you think this is going to happen. If it does or it doesn't, we look on it and we learn from it. Like what happened with Mike McCarthy, what I thought, I took it to the bank. We saw what happened to Dak Prescott. So you have to go, there's certain, whether it's data, whether it's things that coaches say, whether it's stuff in, camp, whatever, you got to make those decisions.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, Joe, about decisions. Who is your third player that you think is going to boom here?
Yeah, my third player I'm going to go with is wide receiver T. Higgins. If you watch some of our other videos, you know how much I like this guy as a value, as I think the Cincinnati Bengals offense is going to return to resurgence with I'm expecting Joe Burrow to play a full healthy season. He doesn't have any nagging injuries coming into the year. His wrist is fully healed. And, I've got T. Higgins projected for 74 receptions and over 1,000 yards with 7 touchdowns. And that's only in 14 games as well, as he's never played a full season. So I don't project him to technically play a full season. But even with that, I mean, over 1,000 yards in 14 games, that's kind of the pace that he had set the year before last year when Burrow was completely healthy. So that's why I'm expecting him to boom.
I mean, I could definitely see it. I just have my doubts about the guy of recent. And you're starting to see players like Yandre Yoshevich and Jermaine Burton. There's some younger receivers that are starting to emerge out of camp that people are starting to think that, hey, these guys are actually pretty good. Tyler Boyd's no longer there. Who's going to fill the void? Do they even take away opportunities from T. Higgins?
Tyler Boyd didn't take opportunities away from T. Higgins. So I'm not expecting any of these other guys to do that. I mean, the year that I'm talking about was even when Tyler Boyd was on the field. So I think T. Higgins has cemented himself, when healthy and on the field, he's clearing away that number 2 target in the offense.
Well, I don't think when it comes to T. Higgins, I don't really think it ever has anything to do with his touchdowns. I mean, only in 12 games last year, he had 5 touchdowns. In 2022, he had 7 touchdowns. In 2021, he's had 6 touchdowns. In 2020, he's 6 touchdowns. He's basically a lock for 6 touchdowns. The question is, how many catches and how many yards this guy is going to get? That's the real question. I mean, before the past season, he was looking at, a little over 1,000 yards almost every time. 908 yards, 1,091, 1,029, and then 656 last year. So that to me is the boom potential. The 6 touchdowns seems like a lock from what we can tell based on what the history says. The question is what's going to happen with the yards and the catches and the involvement in the offense.
Yeah, I think, that involvement's going to stay the same like it was in prior years. And if this guy is able to put it together, a full season, maybe who knows? I mean, he could definitely, maybe he gets up to 9 touchdowns and, 1,200 yards on the season.
That's where he would really boom. And that's where
Yeah.
I feel like, based on history, you've got him a little over 1,000 yards right now, and you've got him at 7 touchdowns. So, you're pretty much on what it has been the past.
And like I said, that's 14 games. I mean, if he plays 3 more games, he should well surpass those numbers.
All right, so my final boom player, based on being in a contract year, is wide receiver Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs coming from the Buffalo Bills, traded to the Houston Texans. Guy's got some swagger, and he has a chip on his shoulder. He wants something to prove. It's really a big question this offseason. I think probably one of the biggest. Who is the Houston receiver you want? Is it Nico Collins? Is it Stephon Diggs? Is it Tank Dell? I think there are a variety of ways you can go as far as your logic as to who you think is the guy. I just think that Diggs, from just a caliber standpoint, he's been one of the best receivers in the league over the past few years. And the caliber receiver that he is, I just don't know if Tank Dell, who is a promising rookie, and Nico, who broke out last year, are those players. I think Diggs might be that alpha receiver who really takes over for this team. We're going to find out, but based on price value that you go for him right now, I think I'd rather, take the shot on him because we've seen what he has been over these past few years. And from what I've heard, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, but based on the buzz that we're hearing at camp, Diggs seems to be quite involved.
I don't know. I haven't seen that. Diggs is the wide receiver you want? You think he's going to be the true wide receiver one on the team?
Right now, I have Nico as the one with playing less games, but I'm monitoring the situation and I'm starting to lean more towards Diggs.
Interesting. Because I'm feeling like he's the number 3 option in the offense.
Interesting.
And Diggs and Dell or Collins and Dell are the number 1 and number 2.
But here's the thing: even with people will say, "Well, you say he's going to boom." I think there's room for Nico and Diggs. I don't think it has to be one or the other. They both can be very good. I mean, look what Stroud did last year. I mean, Stroud was incredible. If he continues, and I think honestly, one of the best things going for him is the offensive coordinator, Bobby Slowick. I think he's going to be probably the next head coach that people are going to be clamoring for because this guy did wonders for the Texans.
Yeah. Yeah, he did. I mean, I get that's definitely the hot new trend as well. Coordinator does well, instantly bringing them on to, be the head coach and nurse a young quarterback.
So that does it for this episode where we talked about some players who are in a contract year that we anticipate are going to boom because, like Joe and I say, they're going to ball out so they can cash out. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.